see, here we go. So thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Black to the Future Action Fund's Climate Justice is Racial Justice Cyber Cipher. I'm your host, Alicia Garza. Now, we know that race, even more than income, is the primary determinant where toxic facilities are placed. Addressing racial justice as it relates to climate justice is about breathing clean air, drinking clean water, and having access to fresh and healthy food that is free of chemicals and that cause debilitating illnesses. This cyber cipher, which I am so excited about, will be a discussion about the impacts of what is being done about it and what is being done in particular about climate change and the impacts of climate change on Black communities. What we need from you today, right now, is to join us. So please take out your phone. I'm gonna give you a second. Take out your phone and text mandate to 510-405-4549. Again, that number, and you'll see it in the chat soon, 510-405-4549. Text mandate to that number to join our efforts to deliver a mandate from Black America. And thank you so much to the Black to the Future Action Fund for convening us. Our first speaker tonight is Valencia G, also known as V, who is a Miami native and the founder and co-director of the Smile Trust Incorporated, formerly known as Make the Homeless Smile in Miami and Atlanta. She is also the co-founder of the Black Collective and is the national organizing lead of the Red, Black, and Green New Deal campaign with the Movement for Black Lives. She's also an advocate in residence at Florida Memorial University. Valencia has led conversations around climate awareness in many communities on topics including sea level rise, emergency preparedness, climate gentrification, food safety, and housing. She also serves on the steering committee for Greater Miami, 100 Resilient Cities, and has spoken around the country on her work around climate gentrification. After Hurricane Dorian, Valencia and the SMILE team expanded their emergency response outreach to the Global South with their One Bahamas programs, providing over 3 tons of supplies to the islands of Bahamas in less than a week, building coalition with local Bahamian orgs and assisting Bahamians, it's been a long day, y'all, Bahamians that were seeking refuge in South Florida. Valencia, welcome.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, I'm so happy to have you here today. So let's get started. What is climate change and how is climate change impacting Black communities overall and within your local context?
Oh, sure. So climate change is, so a more formal definition is the long-term change of weather patterns. It's usually a long-term global effect that's happening, and it's very broad, and it impacts us on different levels. So you see like extended heat, droughts, heavy rainfall, flooding, hurricanes, toxic breathing air, undrinkable water. It's a whole plethora of things that climate change includes. And here locally, I'm here in South Florida, in Miami exactly, and we are ground zero for sea level rise in the world, not just the country, the world. Some scientists are saying that Miami may be underwater in the next 60 to 70 years.
Wow.
The water's coming, you can't stop it, but how do we prepare ourselves for it outside of that? And we're also seeing climate impacting our communities with extreme hurricanes, like Hurricane Irma and Maria and Dorian, for example. But we're also seeing extremely hot days. It'd be like almost 100 degrees, like 60, 70% of the year here.
Wow.
And we are already seeing high death rates around heart failure and heat exhaustion. And definitely we're starting to see a lot of impact on the housing market here around climate gentrification.
Wow. Wow. So what is climate justice? We got a good sense from you of what climate change is, But what is climate justice, and what work are you doing to advance climate justice for Black communities?
Yeah, so climate justice, I always tell folks that it is the human side of the climate change. Usually, climate is a very science, numbers, data, maps type of situation, but the climate justice makes it a human issue, right? The impacts, how human beings are being impacted by it, the things that we feel, how our communities are being impacted, how our systems are being stalled or interrupted, the things that we need to live. And also, climate justice is education and also teaching people their rights so that they know how to stand up against the greedy corporations that's causing our climate to change, and also giving them the power that they need to create community solutions. And it embodies so much. It's art, it's culture, it's music, it's education, it's research, it's data, but it's done through a human perspective, always through a human lens, putting the human being in front of the science.
Mm. I'm like just in awe of you. Your vision is so big and so bold, and it holds all of us. Thank you so much for your work. I want to bring Leah into the conversation. Leah Penniman has over 20 years of experience as a soil steward and food sovereignty activist. And I just saw, Leah, you and your family on the cover of my sister's book, Natalie Bazille, author of Queen Sugar, and all around dope people, like dope people. Shout out to Natalie. And congratulations, because eek. Okay, so anyways,
Thank you.
Going.
That was exciting. And Natalie is incredible.
So amazing. So Leah has over 20 years of experience as a soil steward, a food sovereignty activist, having worked at the Food Project, Farm School, Many Hands Organic Farm, Youth Grow, and with farmers internationally in Ghana, Haiti, and Mexico. Leah co-founded Soul Fire Farm in 2010 with the mission to reclaim our inherent right to belong to the earth and have agency in the food system as Black and Brown people. Her areas of leadership at Soulfire include farmer training, international solidarity, perennials, writing, speaking, making it rain, and anything that involves heavy lifting, sweat, and soil. Leah's book, Farming While Black, is a love song for the earth and her peoples. Leah, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a very exciting conversation.
Yes, we're so stoked to have you. So what is the history of Black environmental justice work? We hear about this a lot, right? A lot of people think, oh, if it's climate, it's like white people stuff, right? But our communities have been up in this mix for a long time. So talk to us a little bit about the history of environmental justice work, Black environmental justice work, and what organizing are you doing to address climate change?
Yes. So the environmental justice movement and the Black environmental justice movement are inseparable. Our people have been the founders, and a lot of folks think of EJ as starting in the early 1980s when community members in Afton, North Carolina, organized to protest against a landfill that would have brought PCBs and other toxics to their community. And over 500 people were arrested. It gained national media attention, is widely thought of as the beginning of the environmental justice movement, and many other actions ensued after that. There's been work in Harlem, work in Miami, work in California. But I want to encourage us to think even further back about environmental justice, because when you think about the definition of how we think about environmental disparities, which is disproportionate burdens on Black and Brown communities, right? And disproportionate benefits on white communities, you can see that Black folks, for as long as we've been here, have been organizing towards the benefits coming to our community and trying to avert the burdens, right? So for example, you think about the late 1800s, Dr. George Washington Carver, Tuskegee University in Alabama, was seeing how the type of European style monoculture of farming with just cotton year after year after year was depleting the soils. It was undermining food security. It was undermining long-term environmental sustainability, and decided to encourage a whole generation of Black farmers to go ahead and plant cover crops, to do diversified horticulture, to bring the soil back to life. This was the beginning of organic farming. It was the beginning of regenerative farming in its modern form. You
Wow.
think about the way that, you know, Mama Harriet Tubman was interacting with the environment as a collaborator in our freedom. So reading the landscape as a tool to freedom. You think about Brista Freeman, who had a whole intentional community of Black folks at Walden way before Henry David Thoreau, who's often thought of as one of the, you know, founders of naturalism and so forth. So we've been in this a long, long time. This is very much our movement. And even today, I learned from my comrade, the renowned, incredible Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, that when they survey Black and Brown folks versus the community at large to see what we care about, Black people care about climate change more than the population at large by 8 percentage points. By 8 percentage points, we care more. And just as we were learning that Black folks are disproportionately impacted by climate chaos, talk about the heat strokes, how farm workers are impacted, the paths of hurricanes, the paths of wildfires, sea level rise, right? We're also on the front lines of solutions and have been, you know, and I'm coming from the farming perspective, so I'm gonna keep bringing it back to the soil. But when Europeans started farming the lands in the 1800s in the Great Plains, within one generation, they had taken 50% of the organic matter, that's the carbon that belongs into the soil, and put it up into the atmosphere as CO2. Now, that is before the Industrial Revolution, and you can see it on atmospheric CO2 maps, that rise in anthropogenic greenhouse gases just from the abuse of the soil. Now, when we came to Soul Fire Farm back in 2006, our soil had very low organic matter. Our soil was very depleted. It had been treated in that extractive way. So we said, what if we took our ancestral methods, our Afro-Indigenous methods of caring for the soil, things I've mentioned from Dr. Carver, like cover crops, things like raised beds of the Ovambo people, things like compost of Cleopatra, things like the perennial polycultures of Nigeria, the terraces of Haiti. Like, what if we take those technologies and apply them here? And we saw every year the organic matter creep up 1 percentage point after a time until we're now at 11 percentage points, which is indigenous organic matter levels. And that's very, very powerful, because if all our food was grown in that way, we'd have taken care of almost 20% of the carbon that we need to capture to stabilize the climate.
Wow.
And so I just want to, I want to shout out like Leonard Diggs at Pie Ranch, Olive Watkins at Oliver's Agroforest, Keisha Cameron at High Hog Farm. There are a bunch of Black farmers who are using these techniques and demonstrating them. Pandora Thomas in California, in an attempt to spread these methods that actually can put the carbon back in the soil. So that's our primary way of organizing, is we're literally using our ancestral practices to heal the atmosphere.
Blessings on blessings on blessings. Okay, that is amazing. And just goes to show you, we already had the solutions. This is like rock and roll. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was ours. You know what I'm saying? That was ours. We have already got the solutions. And now what we need to do is organize, connect, network, and implement. So I have another question for you, because, I was popping off earlier about how the EJ movement gets seen as like a white people's movement. And we have definitely been here. But I want to ask you, where do Black communities fit in the environmental justice movement? And how can environmental justice work help us build Black political power?
Well, to your point earlier, I think it's not so much that we need to fit. Like, we are the environmental justice movement, and it's how do we invite in, on terms that work for us, our accomplices, those who desire to be accomplices. But you look at the work of West Harlem Environmental Action, look at the work of the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, the Mothers of East LA, the People for Community Recovery in Chicago. Like, this is happening, and it's happening because when it comes to environmental justice, we are fighting for our lives, because we know that the systems of white supremacist, racial capitalism, the systems of settler colonialism do not value Black lives. And they manifest that in many ways, like through police violence, through crumbling education system, through lack of access to good food, but also through disproportionate environmental burdens, like lead in the water, like pollution in the air, like the heat strokes and wildfires. So when we organize around environmental justice, we are saying that Black lives matter in all of these spheres. And I think there's no more powerful way to build political power than when we band together in defense of our own communities and defense of our own lives. And like you said, it's already happening. So we have the tools, we have the organizations, we have the leadership. They don't get all the shine that they need, right? But I think it's incumbent upon all of us to consider how we can pitch in and join hands with other folks doing the work to help towards our own liberation.
I love that. Leah. Yes, you're breaking it down. Okay, I'm going to bring Colette into the conversation, but we're going to come back to you in just a little bit. Colette, as you're coming in, I just want to let people know, if you have questions, go ahead and stick those questions in the Q&A box, because we are moving into the question and answer period after this part of the conversation. So I'd like to welcome Colette Pichon Battle, Esquire, honey, Esquire. Now, Colette is the founder and executive director of the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy. That's right. And develops programming focused on equitable disaster recovery, global migration, community economic development, climate justice, and energy democracy. Colette works with local communities, national funders, and elected officials in the post-Katrina, post-BP disaster recovery, and was a lead coordinator for Gulf South Rising in 2015, which was a regional initiative around climate justice and just transition in the South. In addition to developing advocacy initiatives that intersect with race, systems of power, and ecology, Colette manages the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy's legal services in immigration law and disaster law. This is so amazing. Y'all are amazing. Just blessings on blessings. Okay. And in 2018, Colette joined on the Movement for Black Lives policy table leadership team, leading to advance national work on climate justice. In 2018, Colette was awarded with an honorary doctorate from Kenyon College. They are a 2019 Obama Fellow and a 2019 TED Fellow. And in 2016, Colette was named a White House Champion for Change for Climate Equity. In 2015, I'm going to read all your accomplishments, honey, because you have earned these ones. In 2015, Colette was selected as an Echoing Green Climate Fellow and has received awards from the state of Louisiana and the American Bar Association for her work in disaster recovery. Colette, welcome. And yes, thank you. Thank you for all your work. This is amazing. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, sister, for your work. It's a whole bunch of us out here changing the world. So it's an honor to be here with you. Yes.
Oh, I love this. Okay, so can we talk policy, please? Because so what is the Biden-Harris administration prioritizing for addressing climate? And from your perspective, are Black communities included in that vision?
It's a good question, and I hope folks are paying attention. The truth of the matter is we have a much better situation in the White House than has been the last 4 years. And so that is good, and we should, be happy about that. And the Biden American Jobs Plan came out, and it's throwing a few punches, no lie. There are 4 main themes that really can be pulled out. Really thinking about jobs. That's, clearly the number one statement that the Biden-Harris administration was trying to make. This next big package is really going to be about jobs, but it's really going to be about quality jobs. It's going to be about folks having the right to unionize, making livable wages. This is a very different approach to jobs. And so I'm excited to see what they do and how they come out of that. Specifically in the climate realm, how the jobs are going to relate to infrastructure, resiliency in places like the Gulf South and where V is in Florida. It's time to start not just upgrading or updating our infrastructure, but upgrading it to be more climate resilient. So these are jobs to really start getting houses ready for what's coming in the climate crisis. Our Black folks don't know enough about what to anticipate in this new climate reality and this climate reality we're living in, but infrastructure is a big piece of that. And those jobs are in our community. So big hit on jobs. I think there was also a big hit on justice. This president is coming out, this administration is coming out, not just with an acknowledgement of past harms, especially to marginalized communities, divestment from those communities, but is coming out with a solution-oriented approach, saying that 40% of the benefits of climate and clean infrastructure investments are going to go to disadvantaged communities. This is EJ communities, this is Black communities, this is Brown communities, Native, poor, rural, all of these different types of communities are really being prioritized as a space for 40% of investment. This is going to be a lot of dollars coming into our communities. It's important that our communities actually get ready to receive these dollars, because as these things play out, especially in the Deep South where I live, even when the money comes, sometimes the people don't see it. And so it's time for us to get our people ready. There's also a lot of conversation around resiliency, and really, you know, it was noteworthy for me after watching so many hurricanes, so many storms, so many rain events, and even heat events, to watch millions of dollars, billions of dollars of rebuilding come, but none of the rebuilding be done in a way that is more resilient to a new climate reality. And then there's a prioritization around investing in where there's already harm and pollution and where to clean up. Now, this could be good, and I think it gets to your second question. You know, we hear that it's a big hit, and it is. How is it going to fare for Black folks? One thing I'm really concerned about is that this administration, like all of the administrations before, are still rooted in, you know, using a capitalist system to try to solve problems. At some point, someone's going to have the courage to say that capitalism is in fact the problem here. And this racialized capitalism that Leah mentioned, you know, the way it plays out on Black people, Black communities, it is unjust and discriminatory on its face, just by existing. But what's more scary for me is that the Biden administration is getting behind dangerous technologies, what we call false solutions, especially carbon capture and sequestration, which is going to take hold in places like Louisiana in a deep way. That honing in on where the pollution is to sort of do the repair could put our communities in the target lens of folks who are looking to do more harm and extract more from our communities. The jobs, we know, they have to be made available to the people in our community who have been racially profiled, who have, criminal records for things that are now legal. So while some people can, you know, not have a criminal record, our brothers and sisters are walking around with criminal records. Can they get the job with that? You know, these are the things we have to make sure are part of it. It's a good step. I don't want to act like it's not a good step, but I do want to make sure that Black folks, especially and allies and climate advocates around the nation, know that it's not nearly half as much as we need to do. It doesn't go nearly far enough, but at least we're not backpedaling and turning around and not acknowledging that we have a climate crisis. There's some courage here. There's a lot of leadership here. And now the fight is going to be, you know, how can we implement this vision?
I really appreciate how you articulated that, Colette, because it would be too simplistic, right, to say it's not enough, you know, and it would not be honest to say it's really good and that's all we're going to get, right? And so sure. I think that is going to be the characteristic of this administration. And that is why we organize, right? That's because right. We have to build that kind of power in order to move towards those real solutions that you just laid out. So what would you like to see done at the national level in regards to environmental justice? And before I kind of go into this, you know, the federal government can't do everything, but they can certainly set the tone. And we do need to empower local communities, right? Because not every place is the same. And so I'd just be curious to also hear, how do you navigate that tension of, you know, what do we want the federal government to do in terms of setting the tone for environmental justice? And then what does it look like in local communities? What could it look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, you know, there's something underneath that question, which is an elephant in our national room right now, which is, you know, the way folks are talking about government, right? I hate the government, too much government. I mean, these are conservative talking points that they are really hoping that all of us just start to use, right? Because there has been a failure of government, and it would be very helpful to those who do not believe in democracy for the people of of a nation like this to give up on government. We are the government. That's the way we have to see this. And we have to be able to see our own power and autonomy in this. And so what do we want the government to do? Well, we certainly want the government to invest the dollars of the American people in things that advance the vision for Black lives. And this is why I'm so proud to work with Valencia and with the leadership team of the Movement for Black Lives to establish this Red, Black, and Green New Deal, this national Black climate agenda that's really going to put forth not just a vision for climate action, but a vision that doesn't sacrifice Black communities. Oftentimes, some of our best allies, some of the most well-meaning climate advocates see the ability to compromise, the potential for a deal, the chance to pass something big, with the caveat that they sacrifice usually Black communities, usually our communities. And so the Movement for Black Lives just doesn't have to make that compromise. And I'm so excited that we get to put forth a vision. We'll be launching that vision on May 11th. And it's going to say all of the things that we want to see from the federal government. And it's big, we want to see the federal government stop giving subsidies to the companies that are advancing and accelerating the climate crisis. There were billions of dollars of the COVID relief package went to oil and gas companies, not to regular people who can't feed their children, went to companies, the largest multinational corporations that make the largest profits in the world, got tax dollars in COVID relief. I mean, this is the kind of thing we have to stop seeing. And in places like Louisiana, there are tax breaks for oil companies, for poisonous, toxic refineries to be next to Black communities. We actually pay them to be there. Stop using public dollars to kill people. That's what we want to see this government stop doing. This is going to take some courage. This is going to take some leadership, but we're making the demands that save Black lives. And that's really what we want to see this administration do. I think I'm seeing some great hires. I mean, coming into the Department of Energy, the EPA, even the Department of Interior, really seeing this administration pull in some folks who are committed to their communities, who are accountable to the ground. And I think we're going to need to see that. But, we have to get our people to understand that democracy is not something that you go to every 4 years or that gets handed to you in a book. You've got to hold it up, and it gets heavy sometimes. Sometimes you got to bring other people in so the weight isn't so heavy. But this is our job to handle this. And it's our job to get our government, to get us ready for a new climate reality. That means we got to start learning what this means for us. Valencia Gunder is one of the best organizers I've seen. She's leading our organizing and education on the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. It's time for us to take an interest in our future, not just our, the beautiful future that we can imagine, but we need to get real on what's coming and what's coming at our communities and how we need to prepare. So I'm excited. I think this is right. I think this is real. But it's going to take the movement from the ground to meet the movement from the federal level for anything to change. And we don't just need reform, we need transformation. So this is going to take a revolution.
Come on. Yes, yes. All right. I would like to invite the other panelists to come back, and we're going to go right into Q&A. So look, we got a lot of questions up in here. So let me start here. My question, this is from Serena. I'm going to answer this live. My question is, how can we reach out to communities who struggle with people who aren't Black and disability and barely getting their services, with either not reaching college or finishing high school academic potential needs, and how can I help in my community? Okay, let me do two so that we can kind of answer them together. This one's from June Moore. Apologies if I missed it, but can the panelists talk about the term climate gentrification? Thank you for this presentation. Anybody can jump in. Climate gentrification. Valencia, why don't we go to you?
Yeah, I could do climate gentrification because I don't have an answer for the other one. So one I want to name that the actual term climate gentrification was coined by a Black woman. Her name is Colette Richardson. I always like to uplift her in the space because it's so often that white scientists take our data, our information, and all of our work, and they co-opt it. They tried it, but we will not allow that. So shout out to Ms. Paulette. But climate gentrification is a trend when climate change and or sea level rise causes the increase of the market value of property in the displacement of lower income and marginalized families and businesses in urban neighborhoods. So that's the formal definition of it. So you have two sides to climate gentrification. So here in South Florida, we're seeing the before the storm, right? The sea level rise is coming in, the seas are closing in. We're seeing people coming from the beach into the center of the city, which although the Black communities are sitting there, Black communities, brown communities, under-resourced communities, and they're being displaced. We're starting to see rapid gentrification due to climate change. We were told that we were lying, but we have all of the data and the science to prove that climate gentrification is real. And then the other side of climate gentrification that most of us know is after disaster, when big corporations come in and do land grabs. So we saw this a lot in the Gulf South after Katrina. This happens a lot after forest fires in the West Coast, tornadoes in the Midwest. This is a huge thing that happens where people are displaced due to disaster and then they are not allowed to come back. So that is what climate gentrification is, and that's what it looks like on a lot of different scales.
Blessings. Anybody want to add anything to that? I thought it was comprehensive. Okay. Let's keep going here. So this one is a big question. How do you hold space for, okay, now this isn't this is the question that was asked, okay? How do you hold space for less immediate issues like climate change at the same time people are dying at the hands of police? Or how do you convince others climate/environmental racism is important when it seems far off, even though it's not?
Yeah, I'd like to take a shot at that. Really bouncing off of where Valencia left off, in Hurricane Katrina is where I learned about police violence. It's where I learned about housing issues. It's where I learned about healthcare. It's where I learned about reproductive justice, because in the middle of a climate disaster is when they started killing Black people in New Orleans. And I didn't understand why that was happening, but the disaster is where all of the justice issues that we have every day are exacerbated and taken to a whole other level. And I credit a lot of the work of the folks working around, dismantling the prison system and the carceral state. They had to educate a lot of us in the aftermath of Katrina, just around our rights, just around police brutality. And then our advocacy had to be for Black people who had gotten killed that nobody got to hear about because all of the power goes out in climate disaster. There are bodies everywhere. There are bodies being found, and later on you find out the police did it, and then the police are acquitted. I got into and understood police violence because of the police violence that occurred in climate disaster. And I understood housing and the rights of housing and tenants and gentrification because of the housing fights that came with climate disaster. And watching people in public housing in New Orleans be moved and forced to leave at gunpoint, while folks who were wealthy and living in another part of the city got to sit on their porch and drink wine and watch the storm go through with private security, Black water coming out of the Middle East to protect white property. It was militarization was understood through the climate crisis. And for those who don't think the climate crisis is imminent, it's only because you haven't had the understanding that what you're experiencing, higher temperatures, if you live in an urban center where Black people are dying from heat. I think Valencia was giving some of the heat conditions. Black people are dying, but they're not calling it climate. They're saying poverty, or they're saying the person just died of a heart attack. But this is because the temperatures are rising so much and our jobs and our wages are so low that people can't afford to run their air conditioning. This got me to understand $15 an hour and livable wage and the right to unionize. All of the issues of our society are being impacted by this climate crisis. And it is a $350 billion effort to get you to think that it is not an immediate issue right now. You have been fed propaganda on purpose by the largest companies in the world so that you will question whether or not this is even real. And if you believe it, you'll think it's something that can wait. But it's coming soon, friends. If you haven't experienced it, ask all of your friends down here in the Gulf South, ask the folks in the West, ask those folks in the rain event in the Midwest. This is not just strange weather. It's not just a rain event. This is climate change. It's happening now. It is immediate now. And every issue you think you have will be exacerbated once you get to a climate disaster. This is a Black issue. This is our issue. And this is an immediate issue for us to address now.
Facts on facts. So this next question is from Andrew Kang Bartlett, and they say, we'd love to hear more about the Braiding Seeds collaboration with Soul Fire Farm and the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, Leah?
Absolutely. And I just want to also echo and amplify that the environmental crisis and impact on Black folks is now. COVID-19's disproportionate death rate in our community is an environmental crisis because it's on top of comorbidities, it's on top of food scarcity, it's on top of the pollutants in the air, the flooding, the wildfires, the Black migrant labor that has dying of heat stroke is happening and the death rate is high, but it's not talked about that way. So I just want to make sure that we understand the urgency. But as far as Braiding Seeds, this is a very exciting collaboration that is in honor of our ancestral grandmothers who braided seeds of okra, cowpea, millet, black rice, and other crops into their hair as insurance before being forced onto transatlantic slave ships, and passed that legacy of the seed on to us, along with environmental ethic, stewardship ethic. So we are collaborating between rising generation farmers in the Northeast and the Southeast to help equip and support this next generation of Earth stewards. So with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, shout out to them, over 50 years of supporting Black economic independence. We are going to be able to provide 10 fellows with a living stipend, professional development, and wraparound support services to build up their regenerative carbon capturing farms. And this just launched today, so it's a very exciting, auspicious day. You can check out at soulfirefarms.org if you want to apply for the fellowship. If you know people who are wanting to get into farming, encourage them to apply, because we are the folks who will be hands-on putting that carbon back in the soil where it belongs.
I love it. Okay, here's a big question. This one's from Scott Briscoe. Scott says, thank you all, in all caps too, so I think Scott meant it. What are some steps that can be taken to really scale the work that bodies of culture are and have been doing for generations in regards to agriculture and our environment? While there is representation beginning in leadership, i.e. Michael Reagan, Deb Haaland, the broader populations are still only seeing white faces coming up with climate solutions. I'm all about grassroots, but how do we get in front to really, how do we get in the front to really scale our work?
We move the red, black, and green New Deal on May 11th. We take a Black stance on climate. We highlight the people who are doing the work, and we put our demands out there without compromising Black people. I love the question because it's true. And this is why Valencia and I said we got to do this. This is why we've been, honored to some of the things that I think are going to be used, and some of the beautiful images come from Soul Fire Farm and that work that's been going on. I mean, there, as Leah's saying, this stuff has been going on. You're just not seeing us, and so we have to see each other. And on May 11th, when we launch the Red, Black, and Green New Deal, this Black National Climate Agenda, we are going to take a stand, and we're asking everyone to join us. This is not about ego. This is not about a personality. This is not about we don't have no time for that. We want everyone to come in and be a part of this and stand up and say, this climate issue is an issue about Black lives. This is about our future. And the good news is we can take, as Leah was saying, we can take the traditions of our people. We can use our very survival to inform the solutions that are coming forth, and demand that when this Biden administration says they're going to give 40% of investments in this plan, that's billions, probably trillions of dollars. We have to make sure that those dollars come back to our communities. Now it's time for us to get ready, because y'all know how we do sometimes. We're not always ready for when opportunities come because of the urgency that we have to live in every day. But when Leah says Black farmers are working to sequester carbon in their soils by traditional means, then we use that instead of saying we want to see federal investment in carbon capture and sequestration that the oil companies want to do, that is going to kill the communities right next to it. This is how we have to start getting into these conversations. So I just say to the brother, to the sister, whoever that was, come on, we ready. We hear you. We see the same gap, and we're about to blow this up on May 11th. We want everybody with us. We want a Black wave on climate. We want a national Black climate agenda. We're inviting everybody in. Red, Black, and Green New Deal, Movement for Black Lives. Check it out.
Boom. Well, I'm excited to sign on, and I think the Black to the Future Action Fund is excited to sign on. And for everybody who's watching, you should be excited to sign on too, and you can get the info in the chat. Let's go to the next question. This one's from Lauren Belfer. Hey, Lauren, what's up? What's going on? Okay. How important are the negative impacts of animal agriculture, i.e. health, pollution, greenhouse gases, inhumane working conditions, and what can we do to address it? Anybody can take it.
I feel like I'm obvious as the farmer here, but I'll tee it off if somebody wants to take it after that. It's very important to address it. So especially CAFOs, or confined animal feeding operations, are leading emitters of greenhouse gases, especially methane, which has many times the heat trapping capacity of CO2. I also think it's important to say, I'm gonna piss off the vegans, but there is a big difference between industrial animal agriculture and indigenous animal agriculture. There are ways to coexist with buffalo, with turkeys, with ducks, with rabbits, in a way that is part of an ecological landscape where we are not emitting more greenhouse gases than the land that we're using can sequester, and where we have a sustainable year-round protein source that does not rely on shipping proteins from all around the world, especially for those of us who live in colder climates. And so I mention that because sometimes diet evangelism can become a colonizing force. It can shame and marginalize indigenous people. It can shame and marginalize those of us trying to hold on to our cultural traditions. So my personal opinion is that, you know, we might want to consider returning to our ancestral ways, where we see the use of animal protein as a special occasion or a spice, and that we raise the animals that we do interact with reverence, in balance with the ecosystem as one small part of the whole. But I do advocate that we phase out the use of CAFOs, industrial meat production, because not only is it quite inhumane to the animals, it has a huge environmental impact, it's a gobbler of resources, but we also know that those people who work in those meat processing plants and in those CAFOs experience almost unimaginable working conditions with repetitive stress injuries and maiming, even because of how quickly they have to move and the type of tools they need to use. But I do encourage us to really reconsider the way that we use animals in our food system.
I'll just add to that real quick. This is really why it's important to say greenhouse gases and not just CO2. So the mainstream environmental movement really has us sort of gives us these talking points around CO2, but the methane that comes from these massive farms, especially these big cattle farms, is a ridiculous amount of really fast acting gases on our atmosphere. So it has a potent impact, even worse and more rapid than CO2. So the word here is greenhouse gases. Don't get caught up in the oil company against big ag, because that's all that is. We need all of them curbed.
Yes. Okay. More questions. And thank you for keeping it real on the diet evangelism. I was like, let me come on, take that with me. Okay. So this one's from Jessica Johnson. Jessica asks 2 questions. 1, what are the most important actions we can take on a daily basis to positively impact climate justice? Second question is, how do we truly hold the Biden-Harris administration accountable on environmental justice?
I'm just going to jump in on daily and say the U.S. is 5% of the world's population. We consume 25% of global energy. And so if there's anything that we could do daily, is we could change our consumption patterns. The fact that we brown folks are as assimilated into this mass consumption, mass production. We want everything, all our shelves full. We want everything perfect and beautiful and available all year round. The fact that we have assimilated into that makes us part of the problem as well. So our entire nation needs to shift the way it consumes. And if we did that, we could actually balance the planet just by based on one American shifting their consumption patterns, which, by the way, one American consumes as much energy as 370 people in Ethiopia. So this is really about our privilege as Americans, not about race or whatever. We have a particular standard that we've bought into as well. And if we could daily change our consumption patterns, we could impact the globe.
And I want to just add for the daily question is talk to your neighbors. Share the information that you're learning here. I know we're like, we need more Black leaders to the forefront of the fight with solutions. That's true. But also, like, we are our own first responders, right? Talk to the people in your community. Make a program at your church. Go find your local co-op. Go find your local climate leader and spread the word, spread the good word and the truth about it, and share the solutions. Even though they may seem like we don't have a lot of folks, we do. We have you. Everybody on this call, we have each other. Each one teach one.
Beautiful. All right. So this question is, okay, let me start here. The context of this question is about the tendency of politicians to redirect monies coming from the government to go to pet projects. So now let me ask the question. You know, I'm working this chat, honey. I'm working this chat. Okay, so today, this is from Pamela Greenlaw. Today in South Carolina, a meeting was put together by Reverend Leo Woodbury of Black leaders in EJ communities in conversation with the EPA. He and others stated that the monies need to go directly to the communities. How can this be done so that the true leaders, not just the political leaders, create the infrastructure and solution plans for climate resilience?
I have a thought here, but Leah, I'm also interested in how that plays out with Black land and I don't know. I don't have the Black land answer, but I got another answer, which is, you know, one of the things we've been able to develop out, and this comes out of the Gulf South Rising Initiative of 2015, are community control funds. And this is a model where a community establishes its own fund that it controls through a democratic process and distributes based on its needs. What we saw in Hurricane Katrina and even in the disasters afterwards is that money comes, but it doesn't ever really get to the front lines. So we've been talking to a lot of our friends about bypassing all of these big institutions that you see. They're spending money on their overhead. They're not getting money to the front lines. How can we get money to the front lines? Let's start setting up these community control funds that are governed through a collective governance process, really teaching us and reminding us how to govern ourselves, a little bit more of those traditional pieces of knowledge that we all used to do. Sitting in a circle and making a collective decision that's not a foreign concept to Black, Brown, Indigenous people. These are things that we know. You might be out of practice, but you can do it. And these funds, this place to receive these dollars and redistribute, I think should be legitimized. What we have right now are particular groups that are contracted by the state. So when federal dollars come down, they have to come down through the state. That's the main mechanism. When they come down through the state is determining how the dollars get to the community. The community needs to offer a solution on how those dollars can get down, and it's got to be an alternative. No, we don't want them to go there. We want them to go here. Or in addition to those dollars going there, we want these 20 organizations now certified to receive those dollars and get them to the ground. Those things have to be considered by your state level agency. They can't just make this stuff up. They have to have public comment. You can put in solutions. And I say, find out the person in charge of making that decision and send your demands directly to them with good solutions and ideas of getting it to the ground.
I want to build on that. I was going to say something very similar in that both at the state and the national level, Black farmers and food justice organizations are forming our own funds. So in New York, the Black Farmer Fund of New York, President Olive Watkins, the idea is that dollars can be funneled into this democratically controlled body that distributes non-extractive loans and grants out to community-based projects. Similarly, the National Black Food and Justice Alliance is in a formation process of a fund. So that is one strategy. I think another strategy that we're trying to employ came up around the Justice for Black Farmers Act, which among many beautiful provisions has a land reform provision that aims to return the millions of acres of land that were taken from Black farmers through white supremacist violence and USDA discrimination. And so when we ask them, but how are these applications going to be processed to access this land, that was an oversight in their plan. So we've encouraged them to create a community-controlled body made up of Black farmers and Black farmer advocates that have been elected by the community to serve on that decision-making body. So that's a way of sort of working within this piece of legislation, but ensuring some community control in the distribution of resources. Now, I will say, to Colette's point, we are a little out of practice sometimes in how do we collaborate. You know, people, lateral violence is a real thing, right? And people not being able to get along enough. I've been in a room where there was millions of dollars to try to distribute to Black farmers, and the interpersonal conflict got in the way of trying to make a coherent plan for something that we all cared about. So I do think that part of it is practicing within our communities, our communication, our decision making, our transformative justice, our collaboration, so that when those resources do come, we have a body, like a coherent, strong body that's ready to say, yeah, bring it over here, we got this, and we're going to make sure it goes to good work and everyone's going to be satisfied with the outcome.
Ooh, you know, I want to get a highlighter and highlight that point, but we're not going to go there right now. But, you know, yeah. Okay. So we are within, I love y'all so much. And literally, I just learned so much. I'm like, my brain is like a sponge, and I'm over here like trying to read through the red, black, and green New Deal. And I really want to encourage people who are watching right now, sign up and get involved. And in our last 5 minutes, I want to also encourage our panelists to talk about how people can follow your work and get involved with your work. Let's start with Colette.
Well, first, I'll just say, since we're closing out, just thank you for your leadership, Alicia. Like, this is really, you know, to get the email. There are a lot of us watching you, and we really appreciate the way you stand up for our community. So just thank you. And we're going to do our job on climate. You know, this has been a fight for me for 15 years since Hurricane Katrina, and we're calling folks in. Please, you can find us at gcclp.org. That's my organization. You can go to M4BL. We'll be launching the Red, Black, and Green New Deal website, redblackandgreennewdeal.org on April 22nd. Our social media tags will go up, RBG New Deal. So keep an eye out for all of that. We hope to make a big splash. And that's the way you can really follow us. I'm excited about this project. I'm excited about what we're going to do, not because we have the answers, but because we're just calling our people to us. We're beating the drum, and folks are coming, and we're moving in rhythm on this one. So excited about Black folks on climate in 2021.
Leah, how can people get involved with your work?
Well, I wish it wasn't COVID, because I'd invite you all to the farm to plant trees with me, because they sequester carbon and they're sacred and beautiful and fun, and I'm pretty obsessed with trees. But in absence of that, you can check out our website, soulfirefarm.org, or follow us on all the socials at soulfirefarm, all one word. And some of the ways you can engage, we do have a bunch of online classes teaching folks how to do regenerative farming and gardening. There's the reparations map that matches folks with resources to Black and Brown land-based projects that need those resources, so you can find a project near you and pitch in. And there's also an action platform with sign-ons and initiatives that you can join. So peruse the website, find something that makes you come alive, and hopefully we can engage in the future.
Amazing. Sorry, a bug flew in my nose at that very moment. I was like, what is going on, child? Valencia, how can people get involved with your work?
Sure. Colette told you all the social media. Look out for it. We ready. But if you want to get down and like do the back end work, because I'm an organizer, so I like to put people to work. It's a collective process, y'all. So we are looking for support. We want to know all of the Black people across this colonized land that want to dig into building the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. You'll hit that top link that we've been dropping inside of the chat. Now, if you're not Black, we got some work for you too, right? Because we like our reparations in all the ways we can get it. We have an allies network for the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. They also meet twice a month. We're doing some great work to support the RBG New Deal. Please, please, please support us, not by just going to our website, because we want you to do that too and share stuff on social, but get in here and let's get this work done. Get into it knee deep. Everybody is welcome. We have an all Black space because we need that. For those who may get in their feelings, we need it. And we also have a non-Black ally space also for our friends and our comrades that are allies. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Alicia.
Ashe. And thank you. Thank all of you for coming and for sharing your brilliant vision, your bold, bold vision that I think is going to transform not just this country, but the way we be in this world. So thank you for being that bold and that courageous. We also want to make sure we do a call to action. You can volunteer, you can sign up for the Build Back Bold mandate. The link to sign on is in the chat. You can also text mandate to 510-405-4549. Don't forget to sign on to the Red, Black, and Green New Deal. If you want a link to volunteer to the Black to the Future Action Fund, that link will be in the chat. And let me just say, the Build Back Bolder mandate entails recruiting 20,000 Black folks to sign on to the Build Back Bolder mandate to demonstrate community power and wide support for bold progressive policy from Congress and the Biden-Harris administration. We're going to be using these sign-ons in our legislative advocacy meetings to promote and advance a bold progressive policy agenda that centers racial justice every step of the way. Sign on, get involved, do some work. We got work to do. Love y'all so much. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you to our brilliant panelists. And that's the end of this Cyber Cipher. Peace out, y'all.